What is up, everybody? It's JDog6156, and today we're doing another video, and it is the best Democrat versus the worst Republican. As the best Democrat, we have Sherrod Brown, the current senator of Ohio. Now, a little bit of background on Sherrod Brown. He was first elected to the Senate in 2006, and he's basically what I call the Susan Collins of Ohio. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, if many of you would remember back in 2020, in the state of Maine, many people had the state as pretty likely Democratic, and many people thought that Sarah Gideon, the Democratic candidate for Maine, was going to beat Susan Collins. Well, that turned out not to be the case. Also, sorry if y'all hear a bunch of cars coming by. I'm walking down the street while filming this. Just wanted to get that quiet atmosphere. But anyway, yeah, he's basically the Susan Collins of Maine. He really is he's pretty good on policy, very protectionist, which will help him in the Rust Belt. He also reaches out to moderate voters despite his liberal voting record. And actually, the best Democrat was kind of a three-way tie between Jon Ossoff, senator of Georgia, and Andy Beshear, governor of Kentucky. So it was a three-way tie between him, Andy Beshear, and Jon Ossoff. But I chose Sherrod Brown as, I view him as more, not exactly electable, but enough to garner a landslide. Then for the worst Republican, we have Mike Lindell. Now, many people would say, what about Marjorie Taylor Greene or Lauren Boebert? Well, Mike Lindell, I kind of wanted to do what India Walton was. She's not exactly a hand-picked person or someone who's really recognizable. Mike Lindell's recognizable because of the MyPillow thing, but anyway, I don't really have much on Mike Lindell. All I know is that he's kind of like Marjorie Taylor Greene, but not in Congress. He does campaign for Trump, and I don't think that he would win over many of those establishment GOP voters. But anyway, let's get into the safe states. We'll start off with Sherrod Brown. So Sherrod Brown would basically win Washington, Oregon, California, and Hawaii by a safe margin. He would also win Colorado by a safe margin, along with New Mexico. He would win Minnesota by a safe margin as well, along with Illinois, Virginia. Virginia would be probably the closest safe state by around 15%. All these other ones would go to Sherrod Brown by over 17. But anyway, moving forward, these columns of states, DC, Maryland, Delaware, New Jersey, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Vermont, New Hampshire. Well, New Hampshire's kind of a stretch because maybe it could be safe, maybe it couldn't. Yeah, I'm going to put New Hampshire as safe because it voted almost the same as Minnesota did, and if Minnesota's going to remain safe, and I don't know why I put Florida as safe, but if Minnesota's going to be safe because it voted for Biden by 7.1, then New Hampshire should be safe too, especially if this is the best Democrat versus the worst Republican. New York would be safe. Maine's first district and at large would be safe as well. And I think that's all of the safe states for Sherrod Brown, I think. Yeah. So anyway, safe states for Mike Lindell. He would still win in Idaho, Wyoming. He would still do well in North Dakota. However, South Dakota will be the closest safe state. If Sherrod Brown was to somewhat campaign more in this region, then maybe he could make South Dakota go by likely, but it will be around the same margin as Kansas did. Nebraska's 3rd district would be safe due to it being rural and voting for Republicans at a large amount. However, the rest would be others. Oklahoma would be safe, along with Arkansas, Tennessee, Kentucky, and West Virginia. and Alabama. And I guess Louisiana would be safe too. I mean, Louisiana and Mississippi are like, they're not exactly like the swing states of the South, but they tend to be closest, especially compared to all these other red states right here. But yeah, it would be probably the closest out of the other ones. So next, moving on to the likely states. So Sherrod Brown would win Nevada by a likely margin. I doubt that Mike Lindell will be able to do well with Hispanics in the state. And I doubt he would do pretty good anywhere in the country. I mean, the only place he would do well, somewhat good, is in like the Appalachian Plain region, but like that is going to go to him no matter what. So yeah, there's that. Arizona's kind of a stretch, but I would put it as likely by at least like 5 points. Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania would go likely, along with Maine's 2nd district. It would go likely. And Nebraska's 2nd district would also go likely. And Sherrod Brown just won. Flat out won, okay? So yeah, Sherrod Brown has won the election, but we're not through yet. Let's finish the rest of the states. Another likely state would be Georgia. And even though Sherrod Brown does well in the Rust Belt and does decently in the South, Sherrod Brown, I feel like he would be the type of person to like win back many of the traditional traditional Democrats that are in the South and in the Rust Belt. Since Brown is from Ohio and Ohio really loves him, I would put him as likely. However, likely is saying that much of a stretch. I mean, at most I see Democrats in real life doing lean, so I'll most likely put it as lean. I think that's all the likely states for Democrats. So next we have Republicans. Montana's going to go to Mike Lindell by a likely margin. He would probably win it by at least like 12 points. Sherrod Brown could do well in like Missoula and Helena, and he would pretty much decrease the margins in the state. Also, Mike Lindell would win Utah, but he would win it by a far less margin than what Trump did. The GOP establishment would definitely not come out for him and would vote heavily third party to the point where Sherrod Brown can make up the margins in the state. Kansas would go likely, along with Nebraska's 2nd and Nebraska's 1st district. I mean, Nebraska's at large and Nebraska's 1st. Missouri would be likely, along with Indiana. And Mississippi would also be likely in this one. Next, we have the lean states. Sherrod Brown would win North Carolina by a lean margin. He would also win Texas by a lean margin, thus making this a landslide election. And I think that would just be about it for it. For the lean states for for Mike Lindell, he would win Alaska, mostly because libertarians, establishment, GOP, and third-party voters in the state could possibly break for Sherrod Brown, because Mike Lindell, they just wouldn't like him. Mike Lindell, I kind of view him as like Sarah Palin, but as a man. So yeah, there's that factor. I would also put South Carolina as lean as well. I kind of think Sherrod Brown would do decently with black voters, especially if he picks someone who is like black as a vice president. But moving on. So the last two, Iowa and Florida, will be tilt, and they will be going to Sherrod Brown by a tilt margin, mostly based off of that they wouldn't like Mike Lindell that very much. And also, I kind of view Iowa and Florida at the moment like out of Democrats' reach, but for this one I will give it to Sherrod Brown, as he is able to win over many of the moderates. Sherrod Brown would possibly do well in the Panhandle, and he would do well in Miami, along with those others. I mean, Mike Lindell can call him a socialist, but I doubt that would stick. And he would win Iowa mostly because he's from the Rust Belt, and pretty much Iowa and Ohio basically vote the same. And I feel like Sherrod Brown would do well with rural voters in the state. So yeah, this is the best Democrat versus the worst Republican. Now, things could change up depending on what type of party gets favored by this environment. Like, for instance, if the environment gets more favorable towards Democrats, we could see a likely South Dakota, a lean Missouri, a lean Mississippi, and possibly even a lean Alaska. But as of right now, this is where it currently stands. And despite some of these red states being lean, they're lean by like single digits. Like, Missouri goes to Mike Lindell by at least 9 points. Indiana goes to Mike Lindell by around 8 points. Mississippi's by around 7. And the same is with the blue states. Like, Wisconsin goes to Sherrod Brown by 7. Michigan by 12. Well, that wouldn't make sense. Michigan would go to him by at least like 10. Then you have Pennsylvania, who will go to Sherrod Brown by at least like about 9 points. And Georgia would go to him by at least like 5 points. Arizona would go to Sherrod Brown by the same 5 points. And Nevada would go to him by 6 points. So yeah, this is the election prediction right here. I plan on making a Joe Biden versus Donald Trump rematch sometime next week. So please stay tuned. And this is JDog6156 signing.